So today is Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av has been a national day of mourning for thousands of years. And what we focus on is that today is the day that both of our temples were destroyed. And that's what a lot of people really think about on this day. And I'm sure you're going to hear a lot from all the amazing speakers that are part of this fantastic program with Torah Anytime. I'm sure a lot of people are going to speak about how baseless hatred is the reason that the Jewish people is like just splintered and not where we want to be. And what we need to focus on is loving each other and realizing we're all one family. What I want to talk about is the root of where all this came from. See, the first thing that happened on Tisha B'Av was not that both temples were destroyed. That was a result of the seed that was planted thousands of years ago. The root of Tisha B'Av happened back when the Jewish people was in the desert. We were wandering. We just had the Mount Sinai experience. God gave us the 10 Commandments. And a few months later, we were ready to go into Israel, and the people come to Moshe, our leader, our teacher, like the guy that we rallied behind when we left Egypt and we wandered in the desert. He was it for us. And we went to him and we said, before we go into Israel, we want to check it out. We want to go see. Which, if you think about it, is like a kind of crazy request. Like, here's God that we've had this, relationship with, this revelation. We've seen the 10 plagues in Egypt. We got out of Egypt. We saw the sea split. We got to Mount Sinai and we had that whole experience. We had mun fall. It said the mun was what we ate, manna, right? That's what we ate every day in the desert. And it said you could only collect enough for that day. Only enough for that day would fall. And that was it. And you weren't allowed to leave it over to the next day. If you left anything over till the next day, it would rot. I mean, imagine Jewish people. If I go to the zoo, I bring food for a week. Here's the Jewish people. We get enough food for one day. Nothing will even last until tomorrow. And the whole purpose of that experience was to build trust with God, because after being in Egypt, being slaves for 210 years, that's like roughly 8 generations that were born into slavery. So we've been abused as a nation for 8 generations. Our parents were born into slavery. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents were all born into slavery. Nobody knew anyone who remembered pre-Egypt. And now we're out in the desert where there's nothing. We're following a cloud during the day and a fire at night, following God, learning trust. The manna's falling from heaven just as much as we need for that one day. Trust me, it's going to be there tomorrow. God's building our trust slowly because we're traumatized as a nation. We all collective PTSD. And then we're about to go into Israel, which is like God saying, I'm going to give you your own country. And we're like, whoa, not so fast. Can we go see it first? It's like, don't you trust, hello, are you paying attention? Don't you trust me? And the answer was kind of not really, no, we'd like to see it for ourselves. So Moshe, our teacher, who knows us and represents God and then represents us, he's like this go-between who's has our backs, but is also very close to God. He goes back and forth and he sort of says, okay, you could go. I don't think it's a good idea. And God's like, fine, go. It even says in the Torah portion that talks about this, it's called Parshat Shlach, which means the Parsha sending. So the first significant word in that Parsha is Shlach Lecha Anashim. God says, send for you people, which means I don't think this is a good idea. God doesn't think it's a good idea. Moses doesn't think it's a good idea. But Shlach Lecha, you need it. You do it for yourself then. So you could send people. But it doesn't say you can send people to spy out the land. It says latur, which means visitors, walk around and see. And they end up sending 12 men, one from each tribe. And the Torah lists them by name. They were leaders in each tribe. These were great men, scholars, trustworthy, honorable, integrity. We send the cream of the crop to go check out the land. And they were supposed to go latour, like tourists. Walk around and see, check it out, look around. Instead, they had this idea, well, if we're going to tour, let's like do a little spying. Look, let's check it out. We're going to have to fight to get this land. And there were good reasons for them to be scared, but something went off. And 10 of them, after walking through the land, come back with this really negative report. And 2 of them come back with a positive report, which is like really interesting and just demonstrates the whole fabric of what went wrong here. The 2 spies who came back with a good report were Kalev ben Yefuna from the tribe of Judah and Yeshua ben Nun, who's from Ephraim, who was Yosef. So these 2 tribes, which represent royalty within the Jewish people, these 2 men came back with a good report. Now, they all saw the same thing. It says the 10 spies who brought back a negative report about Israel, it says they carried fruit back. And they needed many men to carry back 1 bunch of grapes. It was 2 in front, 2 behind, on each side, because the grapes were so huge. And it's like as if Kalev and Yoshua, the 2 men who brought back a good report, said, look at the beautiful fruit that I'm paraphrasing, look at the gorgeous fruit that grows in this country. This is unbelievable. We are getting the best country. It's so beautiful. Look at this fruit. And the 10 men who had a negative report said, you see this fruit? Okay, now imagine a person who would eat a grape that size. You getting the picture? We're all gonna die. They came back, I'm paraphrasing, but they came back with it. They saw the same thing, but they came back with a negative report. How did that happen? And the Jewish people believed the negative report. It says they cried the whole night. And the next day God said, look, you don't want to go in? You don't have to go in. Don't go in. And that's where the 40 years in the desert came from that night of crying over basically nothing. So what happened? That 10 people saw the same country and saw it so negatively, and 2 people came back and saw it so positively. It has to do with what is the difference between tourists and spies. If you would look at people walking around a country, if they were a tourist or a spy, they might look sort of the same. They're both just people walking around a country. The difference is in their intention. See, the intention of a tourist is to walk around and see the country and appreciate it for what it is. You go to Italy, you go to Mexico, you go to Greece, you go to Israel, you go to wherever you're going. As a tourist, your purpose there is to enjoy it, to see it. There's no agenda. A spy will go to the same places and act like a tourist, but his agenda is totally different. His intention is totally different. He has ulterior motives. He's checking it out for his own personal gain, to find the weak spot, to see what's vulnerable, what's strong. How can I get in this way? How can I get through that way? There's a whole other story going on with a spy. So they started off just la tour, just to be tourists. And at some point, the plan of the 10 men switched, and it became to spy out the land. And Kalev and Yoshua were never a part of that. And we know that because the Medrash tells us, and the Torah itself tells us, that these 2 men prepared for their trip. It says Yehoshua got the letter Yud in his name. Moses prayed for him and gave him letter Yud that he should be able to withstand this test. And Kalev, the Medrash tells us, went to pray in Hebron at the Marat HaMachpelah, where our ancestors are buried. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rivka, and Leah are buried there, and other people are also buried there. But that's the place, the national place where we would go to pray. And Kalev went there first to pray that he would be successful in this mission. So we see that the intentions of Kalev and Yoshua were different. They wanted to just be tourists. They wanted to be loyal to God. They're like, this is our team. And they prepared to be able to withstand a difficult situation. They had to navigate something hard. And the 10 men prepared differently. They went with the intention of spying out the land. We live in a time where, it's tough. And there's a lot of this, deciding an us and them, depending on, how people live, how they vote, what they think, how they see. And we're walking around. And where's this baseless hatred coming from? Do we have an agenda? Why are we in certain conversations? Are we preparing ourselves to be, where am I going? And what is it that I want to accomplish? See, an intention is just a thought. If we think about what am I doing here? What am I living for? What is this relationship about? What do I want people to think about me at work, in school, wherever it is that we go, and we have our conversations and we have our relationships and we have our interactions, what's our intention? Sometimes our intention is to look good. Sometimes our intention is to be right. Sometimes our intention is to win the argument, show people that this is the way to be and the way to go. And sometimes we're not in it to just be present with what's in front of us. It says, I've heard, your ego wants you to look good. Your body wants you to feel good. Your soul wants to do good. Who are we following? What's our intention? If when we go out in the world, we're led by our ego, we'll always want to be right and look good. And guess what's going to happen? It says in Lecha Dodi, which we say Friday night, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The end of every action began with a thought. If you think about an architect who builds a building, right? The beautiful building is sof ma'aseh. That's the end of your action, is the finished building. But machshava tchila, first came thought. First came the blueprints before the building. And before the blueprints, there was an idea. The thought became an idea, became a plan, became a blueprint, became hiring the contractors. Eventually, the last thing that happened was the building's open for business and we walk in. The first thing that happened was the thought that he followed. If we have random thoughts and we follow them, random thoughts lead to random actions, lead to random life. And then you're like, how did I get here? But if we have a thought, sometimes you want to let certain thoughts go. Well, say hello to the thought, let it go. Do not follow that thought. And there are some thoughts that we want to build on and we want to live our life with. I once heard a speaker. She was giving a seminar and she told us a story. She said she had a friend. Here's a story and a story. She had a friend who was giving a seminar at a prison. And for some reason, this friend couldn't show up to do one of the sessions in the series. And she asked the woman I'm listening to now, the speaker, she asked me to do it. So I said, okay, that sounds exciting, go into a prison, never done that before. And she said she gets to the prison and she has all of this fear and worry and all of these, ideas about what it's going to be like to teach prisoners in this, maximum security prison. So she has to go through this gate and that gate and sign this waiver and that waiver. And, if there's a rebellion, they're not going to come in and get you, all of these crazy things. And she's like, oh my God, what am I doing? And she goes in, eventually she's in the room with, the prisoners. And the seminar that was being given was on thought and behavior and actions. And she said she walked into the room and she expected the energy to be eerie and sinister and narrow-minded and, like cynical, like this. And she said instead it was like it felt open and expansive and thoughtful. And she was like, it feels great in here. She was not expecting that. So she said to the people in the class, these guys who are in jail, she said, what's my friend teaching you? What are you up to? What are you getting from this course? And one of the men, they all shared roughly the same thing, but what sticks out to me, I took the seminar 10 years ago. I never forgot this story. One of the men said to her, you know, when I robbed that 7-Eleven or whatever it was, I didn't know that the thought that I had about robbing or hurting people, I didn't know I didn't have to follow that thought. You know, when I got angry and I wanted to hurt someone, I didn't know I could like let that thought go and not act on it. I felt compelled to act and I thought I had to do it. And what I've learned here is I can have a compelling thought like that and I don't have to follow it. And the woman who's telling the story, the speaker that I'm listening to, she said, you know, I'm listening to them and it's on the one hand, it's amazing. And on the other hand, I learned that in kindergarten. You know, use your voice, not your hands. Take responsibility for your thought. You know, like that poster, Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Sometimes we know stuff and we lose it along the way. And we stop following what we know to be true. And what the Torah is pointing us towards is to take that responsibility of our intention. What is it that we want to get out of life? If you want to have peace between people, if you want to have warm relationships between people, it means we have to step into the driver's seat and we may have to give up being right or looking good or even feeling good. You know, doing the right thing does not mean you're going to be so comfortable all the time. It might mean that you look wrong. It might mean that you're uncomfortable. You have to put yourself in uncomfortable situations so that you can do the right thing. And you can be a force of good in the world. You know, comfort is not the goal. Accomplishment is the goal. Doing good is the goal. Being part of the solution is the goal. And what Tisha B'Av is pointing us towards, you know, it's the roots of Tisha B'Av are people that, you know, started off meaning well. These are great people. They just lost it somewhere along the way. They slipped in their intention and they ended up doing something they didn't want to do. And the people who passed the test are the ones who stayed firm in what am I going for? Let me prepare, let me pray, change my name, let me stay focused. So when I walk through this storm, I find my way out in where I want to be. It says after the people cried the whole night and they were told you're not going in and you're wanted for 40 years, they said, no, we want to go. It's too late now. You can't go now. We knew we made a mistake. How many times in life do we know we made a mistake? Thank God. 99.9% of the time, we get a second chance to make that phone call, to give that apology, to straighten out a misunderstanding. You know, what's it going to cost us? How much is it worth to us? The definition of love, according to Maimonides, right? We all want to like love our neighbor as you love yourself, right? Baseless hatred is the problem. Love is the answer. Well, how do you do that? Here's how you do it. It's really easy. Judaism is a religion of action, which means we want you to do the right thing, but you don't have to ad-lib it. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The Jewish people has been at this for 3,000 years. We got a lot of tips and a lot of strategies about how to have a great life. You want to love people? Maimonides sums it up. Here's what you do. Here's a definition of love. Love is the feeling you get when you focus on another person's virtues and you identify them with their virtues. You get that? You look at somebody, you identify them with, there's certain smells you identify with home, or a song you identify with camp, or whatever. You find a person's virtues and you identify them with their virtues. If you do that, you will love everyone. The only thing you have to do that is intention. You have to want to. Because if we walk through life randomly, not thinking of where we want to be, not thinking of how we want to see people, they'll do something that annoys us and we'll be like, oh, she's so annoying. And then we identify them with that. And then we wonder why there's so much hatred in the world. Well, there's only hatred in the world because people have hatred. And the only reason why people have hatred is probably because they're not paying attention. I think most people that you know are good people. And the people that we know that, annoy us, rubbed us the wrong way, it could be they did something wrong, but I bet if I would ask them what happened, they'd have their version. Everybody's doing the best that they can. So we don't have a remote control to control everyone else and make them perfect. The only thing we control is ourselves and our intentions. And who are we when we walk out in the world? What are we bringing to the table? Are we part of the solution, or are we part of the problem? The world can be a really divisive place. That doesn't mean that you have to bring more divisiveness to it. The world may be divided into us and them. That doesn't mean you need to walk through the world thinking, my team, not my team. You don't need to do that. You can walk out into the world, just smile at people. Just say hello. Have the intention, have the thought of, I am going to find the good in people, and I am going to identify with that. I'm going to identify them with that. I'm going to identify myself as a person who does that. One person at a time can shift everything. We don't have remote control for anyone else. We can only control ourselves. We can control our intention and how we walk out into the world. Tisha B'Av is a day where we look back on the tragedy, and we're supposed to cry for the Jewish people. We're supposed to take one day and just focus on the pain the Jewish people has been through. But Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, happens in a month that's called Av. Av means Father. God is talking to us. He's pointing us towards, I know it's painful. I'm your Father, and I love you, and I'm right here. My favorite God quote, I'm sure you've heard it if you've been in my classes, if God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. He loves you. He's absolutely crazy about you. But if you think about a parent, they don't always do everything that you want them to do. Grandparents, they just want to spoil you. But a father, a parent, sometimes they don't want you to be in pain, but they know it's good for you to go through something that life isn't handed to you on a silver platter. I remember one time one of my kids was in sleepaway camp, and he didn't like it. And he begged me to come home. Begged. First day, second day, third day. I'm like, why do you even have a phone? Why are you calling me? But he really wanted to come home. And I was like, I'm really sorry, but you got to stick it out. Now, this was an amazing camp. It's not like he was, in the gulag. He was in a great camp. But he didn't want to be there. He wanted to come home, and I knew this is good for you. I know you're in pain, and I know you're upset. I know you want to come home, but it's good for you to go through this. Sometimes there's pain in the history of the Jewish people. It doesn't mean that God isn't there. And I do not have all the answers, but what Judaism is pointing us towards is your life is taking you somewhere. And what we can control is our thoughts and our intentions and how we walk out in the world every day. I've been with a lot of people over the past week, and some of them I know have been through really hard things. I've been through stuff, you've been through stuff. We cannot control what happens to us. We can control our intention when we take the next step forward. This Tisha B'Av, we take time to look back and experience the pain and be real with it. We're not in denial saying there isn't pain in the world. There is. And the Jewish people has been through pain, and we're real with that. And the Jewish people, we are strong enough that we dust ourselves off. And the day after Tisha B'Av, we step forward again. We step forward with positivity and being the solution in the world, being the light unto the nations that we know we're supposed to be. And the Torah is there to give us those tips and those strategies to make it successful. So my biggest bracha to all of us is that we all become part of the solution. It says if we can get our act together, Tisha B'Av will be changed from a day of mourning to a day of celebration, a day of joy. So my biggest bracha to all of us, myself included, is that we should be part of the solution. We should be strong enough and focused enough to have the right intentions and to pass those tests that we get every day, to be part of the solution so that this year is a year of blessing and abundance for everyone. And next year, Tisha B'Av, instead of being a day of mourning, will be a day of celebration.